right, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday edition of Wall Dropping History. I am again your host, Mr. Waldrop, and I will be hosting today, and I have my guest with me, Elizabeth. Here, slide in. She was not in position here. I have my special guest host with me here, Elizabeth Waldrop.
Oh, hello.
Okay, glad to have you with us today. Yeah, please, if you wouldn't mind, do me a favor, drop a like, subscribe if you've not already subscribed. We're getting really close to hitting that 100 subscription milestone, so glad to have y'all with us today. Thank you for your dedication to your education. Today we are doing something a little different. This is still, and if you saw me yesterday, you're kind of getting the same speech twice, kind of. But in a nutshell, sociology and psychology are in the branch of social sciences, right? So this isn't really an episode about history, but it is an episode of social science, right? So we are going to do a little social science today. If you like these types of episodes, let me know in the comment section. I can do some more of these if you're interested in sociology and psychology.
I didn't know whether it was sociology or psychology, but I remember one time you brought us into your class.
That was for psychology, yeah.
That's what I thought it was.
Okay, so let's look at the agenda today. So real fast, if you've not already done so, send in your videos or pictures of your pets. We're going to have that on the Friday edition of the show. We're going to go over pets. What about debate? Yeah, maybe we could do that. That would be interesting. Maybe even have a mock debate. That could be fun. Mock debate. Or have an actual debate. Maybe have me and somebody else Skype in and have an actual debate. That could be fun.
What?
Just different topics. The art of debate, right? So that could be fun. So if you like sociology and psychology, you want to break up the monotony of just history, let me know. And so Mr. Raby says he would... so let me say one thing. If you do not have a pet, don't worry. It's just for fun. You know, it's just to make the Friday edition a little more fun, a little more different. So if you don't have a pet, it's not required. You're not going to lose points or anything like that. So if you don't have a pet, do not worry about it. That's fine. But if you do have a pet, send them in. Well, happy birthday. And so let me give my shout-outs. Thank you, Nirali. Thank you, Jayla. Thank you, Kiera. Thank you, Rachel, Demarion. Let's see, Patrick's in here, and DeHavius, and Nee. I'm not sure who Nee is, but thank you for joining us, Nee. And thank you for joining us today, and happy birthday to DeHavius. Glad you could show up today on your birthday. Sorry you're spending your birthday on COVID quarantine. That's not fun. In fact, I think my son's going to have a COVID birthday, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's not ideal, but hopefully you'll be able to get out and celebrate it very soon.
You could go camping.
Yeah, you could. You could go camping. Let's see. Oh, well, thank you, Aranisha, for joining us. Glad you could show up, Miss Cole. And thank you for making us part of your day. So, for real fast, oops, that's the wrong agenda. I don't know where the right agenda is. So we're going to hide that agenda. Oh, and thank you for joining us, Quinn. I did not see your name in the chat. So I hopped in the chat a little late. I see now, I'm looking at it and scrolling back up. It does say hi. So thank you for joining us, Miss Quinn. I appreciate it. So we're just going to skip through the announcements. Basically, we'll try to enjoy it, buddy. So Monday we did psychology. You can go back and see that episode. Today we're doing sociology. Tomorrow we're going to do Pandemic Wednesday, and I got a special little treat for Pandemic Wednesday tomorrow. And then Thursday I'm still thinking about a topic.
If you have a topic, send a topic.
Debate could be one. We could kind of just break this entire week up and just do the other constructs of social science. So maybe we could do debate, but if you have another topic you want me to do, feel free to leave that in the comment section. So today we're going to talk about sociology. Now, maybe you've heard of sociology, maybe you have not. Maybe you hear that and you're like, what is this sociology stuff, right? So I want you to think of it in this terms, right? Psychology is the study of what makes you think the way you think, right? We talked about that in its construct yesterday, right? Why is it that I myself am somebody who likes video games? Say, what makes me like that? Whoops. What is something that makes me who I am, right? Why is it I want to be a social studies teacher, right? Why is it somebody else loves music and somebody else doesn't care about that music, right? That's the psychology of why you are the way you are. And thank you. Let's see what's up. And I got the AP email thing. It came in a little card. Oh, sweet. Thank you for. And by the way, thank you for showing up, Sydney. Yeah, let me. If I've not already gone over the AP stuff, make sure you hang tight. I don't remember if I went over the AP stuff with you or not, but please make sure you hang tight after the show so I can. If you have not already heard about the AP stuff, so I can tell you about it. Okay, so psychology is why do you think the way you think? What makes up you? Sociology pulls it back a little bit, right? Instead of why do you think the way you think and why do you act the way you act, it is why do these people think the way they think? Why do these people act the way they act, right? And so you can think of big examples and you can think of little examples, right? So like you could go to the example of why do Broadmoor students like to wear hoodies? They love wearing hoodies, right? And I mean, most people like wearing it in general, but shoot, Broadmoor students will wear it when it's like 110 degrees outside. They'll just be sweating themselves to death in class, right? Sometimes my classrooms smell like a gym locker because they just up in there sweating. Whoa, where are you going? Oh, okay. So, you got to think of it in that terms. But then, there may be an aspect of some other school's culture that's completely alien to you, right? So it's basically why do these groups of people behave the way they do? And you can go in any kind of macro, micro sense, right? So like all humans on Earth like to be successful at work, right? Why is that something important to them that they be respected? You can go in the smaller setting of why is it Broadmoor students like eating hot fries? Okay, so you can look at it in either of those two contexts. And we're going to look at the different ways that sociologists look at sociology. Okay, so here's a good example of a question a sociologist would ask. And I'm curious what you think in the comment section. Does social media make us more connected? What do you think? Does social media make us more connected?
Yes.
Elaborate.
Like, maybe not, like, well, maybe because, like, people, like, from the news and stuff like that tend to post stuff on the, on social medias. And, like, I know, like, you get all of your debating done on Facebook.
Right.
So that people are more informed.
And I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. Think about it in the standpoint of how could Rachel stay connected to her family without technology, at least, right? Whether you're talking WhatsApp or social media, stuff like that, seeing pictures of her family. However, this may shock you. Let's look at some of the numbers. 13% of people who spend spend 4 or more hours a week on social media spend less time with their family and friends. They spend 8% less time going to social events. People who spend more than 2 hours a day have twice the odds of perceived social isolation than those who have spent a half an hour a day. Okay, so exactly when they poll people, right, when they ask the people themselves, the people that spend more time on social media feel more isolated, they interact with people less, and they go to less events. People visit social media platforms more frequently, 58 visits per week or more, had more than 3 times the odds of perceived social isolation than those who visit fewer than 9 times per week. So when you actually polled people and asked them, do you feel more socially isolated? And when you look at whether or not they go out and interact with other humans, the more they spend on social media, the more isolated they feel and the less they interact with other humans.
My brain immediately went to, whenever you say connected, my brain immediately went to, the news.
Right. So, it's a fascinating thing, right? You sit there and think, well, wait a minute, I'm interacting with thousands of people a day. But it's very superficial interactions. Yeah. Like, really superficial interactions.
They're not really interacting with anyone.
So, and of course Rachel says, no, since we get absorbed by it. So that's a great way to put it. I love how Miss Raby puts it. It gets people in touch, but it doesn't necessarily connect them. That's a great way to put that. I love that. So the question is, why does more social media equal less connection? And I think I kind of already buried the answer in there, but it's because it's very superficial. There's a very huge difference between sitting down and genuinely having a conversation with somebody versus little pot shots with strangers that you don't really know and don't care about. I think we've all seen the keyboard warriors, where they would never talk to people in real life the way that they'll talk to people online. They're rude, they're dismissive, they're arrogant, so on and so forth. It's very superficial. And you see that all the time. Like, go to any chat board of any group, you're going to see some of the worst comments and so on and so forth. So what is sociology in general, right? So sociology is defined as the social science that studies human society and social behavior, not personal behavior.
That makes up the word sociology.
Correct.
I didn't see that.
Social science are disciplines that study human behavior or institutions and functions of human society in a scientific manner, right? You can't ask yourself stuff that is immeasurable, right? So, like, you can't measure to what degree do Japanese people like giant mech robots more than Americans. You can't measure that. But you can measure how much more money movies like Pacific Rim make in East Asia versus here in America, right? So it has to be a way that you can measure it tangibly, all right? It's the best you can. So you got to do a lot of survey taking, right? So sociologists, not Scientologists, that's a completely different thing. Sociologists focus on social interaction. Now, the goal of sociology is to adopt a sociological perspective. You must look beyond the meanings of individual human decisions, right? It allows you to see how humans are influenced by social decisions, right? So the goal is basically to sit there and ask yourself, it's almost the nurture aspect of psychology. It doesn't just ask what part of you is you because of the way nature interacts with you, but it asks the broader question of why does all of society develop these social trends, right? So, can you think of something that you do because others around you do it?
Not
what is something
me.
you do? Oh, hogwash.
No. I was gonna say something, but like, no, it's not for me. But like, I know, like, cause we had in 3rd grade, I think it was. No, it was 5th grade. I remember because it was my last year. Okay, so we had a DARE officer come, and he said that peer pressure could be like it's just other people pressuring you into doing something that you don't want to do.
Yeah, but it doesn't always have to be bad, right?
Yeah,
sometimes it can be good. Like, I go in the men's room because I was raised as a small child to go, hey, that's the bathroom you go into. There's a lot of stuff like that. Like, I'll give you another example. When you go to the grocery store, nobody tells you to stand in line. There's a reason you just walk up and skip to the front of the line. Society tells you, and by the way, everybody's saying no, everybody does this. There's a ton of things. Let me tell you this. If you see somebody, if you're walking down the hall, and you see 50 people running down the hall screaming, run for your life, you're not going to stop and go, I wonder what's down there. Let me go investigate. No, you're going to turn around and you're going to run for your life, right? You're not going to have to stop and wait to see that there's some shooter coming in the building, shooting the building up. You're just going to start running, right?
This is why we have lockers. I can just hop into a locker and just hide.
Yeah. So let me tell you this. Every single person, their life is filled with decisions they make because everybody else is doing it. And it's not a bad thing, right? It's not always bad. So, it could be something as very simple as, picking up habits, right? Like, the reason I'll tell you a good example. I taught my kids to play spades, right? I didn't teach myself how to play spades. Other people taught me how to play it. And I said, hey, this is fun. Let me teach it to my kids. When I first played video games, It's because I went out and they had a display and I saw kids playing video games and said, "Huh, that looks like fun. I want to try that." So the reality of it is it's not always bad, right? Like, doing things because society tells you it's good is not always a bad thing. Every person that's reading this has every person that's reading this that watches television, the shows they watch are because somebody else told them about it or an advertisement told them about it, right? Like, nobody just picks up a show just on their own without any advertisement, no promotion, no nothing, right? So it doesn't have to be. That's the thing I want you to get. Society molds you and changes you, but that's not a bad thing. Most of who we are is society altering tiny little decisions. That's not a bad thing, right? The foods you all eat are because people in Louisiana eat that type of food, on the most part, right?
I don't.
Now, the theory that individuals, groups, and peoples are subject to the same Darwinian laws of nature, selection as plants and animals, is known as social Darwinism. Now, this has been largely discredited, and social Darwinism is advocated by a guy named Herbert Spencer and others of the late 19th and early 20th century. He used it to justify political conservatism, imperialism, and racism to discourage intervention and reform. We talk about this a lot in Manifest Destiny, right? This belief that it's just okay to
Americans' God-given right to expand from
to take Native American land just because of white privilege, right? And by the way, thank you for showing up, Ashley. Now, here's the thing I've seen. We have recently seen this idea surface with the notion that we should allow the sick and elderly to just die in order to reopen the country. Can you think of another time where we were willing to allow governments to do horrible things to people and then try to justify it? And I kind of gave you one with Native Americans taking their land. But can you think of any others, Elizabeth? Where our country did unspeakable, or another country did horrible things and then tried to justify it in the name of social Darwinism? Can you think of one?
Hitler?
Yeah, that's a great one. No, there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's an example of social Darwinism. He's basically saying that Jews were unfit to survive, and Hitler tried to wipe the Jews out. That's a great example. Japanese internment comes to mind. Putting the immigrants in concentration camp, or whatever you want to call them, the detainment of children at the border. There's lots of them, right? You can go to Argentina's little schools. Plenty of times where we just justify the way we treat groups of people under the basis that particular culture is bad, right? Social Darwinism.
But
wars is a great one.
All the time, whenever someone's being racist, the only thing that pops into my head is not I really hate that person. It's they can't choose what race they are when they're born. And if you
slavery. Slavery was justified.
Why would you do that to them? Because you could have been born that color.
Right. Now, as stated in psychology, a theory is an explanation of relationships among variable phenomena. Sociologists must develop a broad theoretical perspective to provide the foundation for their theories of school or thought. A lot of the theories in sociology, it's very hard to prove. It's more generalities than laws, right? So you can make a lot of generalities about a society, but you can't make hard, fast rules because there's always going to be exceptions, right? I know that when I pick a pencil up and I drop it, the law of gravity is going to apply, right? It's always going to drop. In sociology, I can sit there and say, American culture says that murder is wrong. But I guarantee you, if you were to poll every single American, some of them think there's plenty of times where it's justified to flat out murder people. So you're always kind of talking in generalities, right? Now, the functional perspective is a view that society is a set of interrelated parts that work together to produce a stable society. Most people agree on what works best together to ensure the society runs smoothly. Elements that do not help society run smoothly are called dysfunctional, right? So you could talk about crime, murder, rape, etc. However, sometimes they get controversial. And the best one I can think of is pants sagging, right? I don't think any parent wants to see their kids pants sag. However, different areas have decided to handle it differently. Some areas, for example, Flint, Michigan, it is a crime to sag, punishable by up to 93 days in prison and a $500 fine. Right? So if you're walking down the street and your pants are sagging, they can throw you in jail. You know, imagine if they tried to enforce that in Baton Rouge, it would be insane, right?
Ew.
So it's one of those, what is dysfunctional in one society may not be dysfunctional in another, right? That's an open to interpretation situation, right? Can you think of something that society accepted, but now they do not? Or something that they did not accept, but now they do? So what is something that society used to accept, but they do not accept anymore?
Like, people that are old.
What do you mean?
Like, everybody used to respect your elders, but like now it's either the economy or elders.
I think most people are still.
Elders can just like die.
I think most people still say you should respect your elders. I think one a better example would be like something that used to be. Demarion, look, he beat me to it. Okay, I was going to say LBGT community, right? They used to be very socially unaccepted. Now bigotry against the LBGT community is unaccepted. So we went full 180. You beat me to it. Good job, Demarion. You beat me to my example. Child labor is another one. Kids having cell phones. That's becoming more and more socially acceptable. It used to be that all women had to cover their faces in church. Now it's like nobody thinks about that. The average man walked around with a hat.
Actually,
It used to be guys walked around like you were supposed to have a hat. Guys just walk around with a hat on. Now, I mean, when's the last time you went and saw teachers walking with a hat on? Now, it used to be women wore gloves. Let me tell you this. We may see, because of COVID-19, it start becoming a social. It went from being socially accepted to cover your face to not being socially accepted. It may be that becomes the new fashion trend. In fact, I tell you, if I had a lot of money, I would jump in on the fashion face mask game, right? Somebody's going to get really rich making designer face masks. And I've already started to see them pop up in my news feed. Like you can get some with your favorite NFL team on it.
I've actually seen an advertisement to get new emojis with gloves on.
Yeah.
Like gloved
Yeah,
emojis.
designer
Like,
gloves.
What the heck?
Right. Okay, a manifest function is the intended and recognized consequence of some element of society,
Why
right?
would they teach that in Charlie Brown? What?
Hold on.
So
A
many
latent
questions.
function is an unintended consequence of an element of society. So, for example, everybody thought, cell phones are going to make traffic so much safer. Because now, if you can get in a car accident, or if you get in a car accident, you can just call for help, right? So, an ambulance can be on scene quicker. Hold on. So, an ambulance can get on scene quicker and save lives. But it had an unintended consequence that because so many more people are distracted driving, it actually made driving less safe. So this tool that was supposed to help us be safe, it used to be for the longest time, there was car phones, right? For people to have to use in the car, right? So when you're driving, you can pick up the phone and talk in the car. So it ended up having the opposite effect of what was intended, and that is a latent function versus a manifest function. A manifest is something you're trying to create. A latent function is something that is created from what you were trying to create. Can you think of any unintended consequences of a social change? And here's another one I gave, was Amazon, right? The intended function was to make shopping easier. The latent function is, when's the last time somebody went to the Cortana Mall? Right? It's done. It's dead. Right? Toys R Us went out of business. And Amazon killed them both. In fact, malls all across America are dying. Because they just can't compete with Amazon. Right? So, what are some unintended consequences of a social change that you can think of? Like, give me a social change and an unintended consequence. Can you think of one? We talked about one at the beginning of the show, right? We thought social media was going to make us more connected. It actually made us less connected. You think of, here's another one I thought of. We thought, oh man, the internet, we're going to have so much information. Everybody's going to be so well informed. But the latent function is, now everybody can be misinformed. Okay, if you want to believe Bigfoot's real, you can find 1 million websites that confirm Bigfoot, right? So it had this unintended effect that now people are less informed than they should be, right? You have the entire world suppository of knowledge sitting at your fingertips right here, but the unintended consequence is you have access to a mountain of bad information. So if you can think of any other examples, let me know. Now, the conflict perspective. This focuses on forces in society that promote competition and changes. It looks how people in society have power and use power on others, right? So, whether you like it or not, I'm not a fan, but, the president can make a decision that affects me. Okay, another human living thousands of miles away makes a decision and it changes the scope of my life. Right? And I think about it in terms of, how the Islamic community is treated now because of, the anti-Islamic sentiment, or the travel ban. We think about the travel ban, right? How many lives did that impact when all of a sudden randomly 7 countries got put on the travel ban? This is before the thing, right? So can you think of a time where the government or business did something that impacted you directly? It doesn't have to be the government. It could be a principal. It could be a teacher. It could be anything like that, right? Can you think of one?
Does it have to be negative?
No, it could be positive. Like I know the government decided to step in and they're going to cut us a $1,200 per person check to help us deal with COVID-19. That was positive.
Well, I was going to say the principal of my school decided to let kids go to DC.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
I was chosen to go to DC.
I know that the Affordable Health Care Act freed up a bunch of money for me to go back to college. So that was an intended benefit. Yeah, the quarantine, that definitely impacted. They decided to lock the state down, and it had a huge impact on our lives.
Wait. You're going back to college?
I did go back to college, baby.
Wait.
I went to Auburn. You were there.
No, I thought you meant you're going back to college now.
Now, the interactional perspective. This perspective focuses on how individuals interact with one another in society. They study how individuals respond to one another in everyday simulations. So they would look at symbols, and a symbol is anything that represents something else, but it requires all members of society to agree with it. The online assignment's considered as bonus. Yeah, that impacts you. They also look at the process of symbolic interaction. So I'm kind of a gamer, a little bit of one. I'm curious if you, Elizabeth, can tell me what any of these, do you know what any of these acronyms stand for? What about AFK? Do you know what that stands for? Do you know what any of those stand for?
Does PS4 stand for PlayStation 4?
It does. It stands for PlayStation 4. That's right.
I'm scared I was going to get that.
Okay, so AFK is away from keyboard. Means you're getting up and you're walking off, right? You're not going to be there. Lag means your computer's slowing down.
I knew that.
COD, do you know what COD stands for?
COD?
Yeah, it's Call of Duty. DSL, it's an older one. It basically stands for Digital Service Line. It's how you get your internet. P2P, that's player to player or person to person, like when you're chatting with somebody. PvP, do you know what that stands for?
I don't know what any of these.
It's a video game. It stands for player versus player. Okay. PvE stands for player versus event. Right. So it means you're basically fighting against the game. Right. So like me and you would be PvE if we're teaming up. If we're fighting against each other, it's PvP. GTG, G2G is got to go. That's right. LFP stands for looking for party. COD means cash on delivery, right? So they can mean different things for different people. F2P stands for free to play. JAL stands for a Japanese player. Like if you're playing an online game and they say they're JAL, that stands for Japanese language. And I just know that because I played games where you have to interact with people from other countries.
No, all I recognized was cod, because, like, cod's a fish. That's all I know about cod. So
right.
You're like, it's Call of Duty. I'm like, I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years.
Yeah, and JAL in the international community, it stands for Japanese airline. But if you're playing an online video game, JAL stands for Japanese language. It means they speak Japanese, not English. All right, cultural diversity. Now, for when people hear the word culture, they often think about race or art or literature. But for a sociologist, they look at everything. Language, art, ceremonies, religion, rituals, rules, behavior, social organizations, food, and even work roles. Okay? So a culture consists of all the shared products of human groups that include both physical objects and belief values, as well as behavior shared by the group. A society is a group of interdependent people who have organized around a common culture, right? So we as a society have decided here in America that robbing banks is bad, right? We've also decided that flowers at a funeral is a good thing, right? So what are some behaviors you associate with U.S. cultures? What are some things you associate with other cultures? Can you give an example? Oh, Demiri knew player versus player. Good one. Oh, and Davius knew Call of Duty. There you go. What are some things that are part of American culture? You've been all around the world, Elizabeth. What are some things that are American culture, and what are some things that are Indonesian culture?
But Americans stole everything from everybody else.
It doesn't matter. What are parts of your culture that are different than Indonesian culture? Having been there before.
Indonesians are mostly Muslim.
That could be part of it. It's a very Islamically influenced culture, right? Davius said guns. Yeah, that's a very American culture.
Like almost every.
But what about food? What about food?
What do you mean food?
What are some foods that Indonesians eat a lot more of that we don't eat as much of?
Rice.
There you go.
That's all they
right?
eat.
You're overthinking
rice.
it, right? Using chopsticks. That's right. Yeah, Asians eat a lot more rice, right?
Things are easy.
I guarantee you, Quinn's household eats more rice than the average American household. If Nirali's still in the chat, I bet her family eats a lot more rice than the average American household. I eat way more rice since I married Rachel than I ever did. I probably eat more rice in the last 4 years than I did in my entire life leading up to meeting Rachel. I'd be willing to bet that. So, that's a good aspect of it, right? Raleigh said, yeah. So, that's an aspect of Asian culture. Music can be a different one, right? I would be willing to bet Raleigh listens to music that you and I have never heard of, right? She watches Bollywood, right? Before I hung out with that Bollywood crew, I'd never even heard of Bollywood. You used to eat rice almost every day in India. Yeah, Rachel used to have this thing where it's like in Indonesia, it's not considered a meal until you've had rice.
Oof.
Yeah. And Rachel eats more spaghetti now. Yeah, a lot more pasta. And bread. I imagine she eats a lot more bread now. Western culture has a bigger emphasis on single individual compared to Eastern cultures. That's a great way to explain it. Now, material and non-material culture. Now, material culture are the physical objects that make up a culture, right? The different candies, right? So Asian candy is different than the candy that we're used to having. In Mexico, the music and even the celebrations, right? The food, right? We don't celebrate the Day of the Dead here, but they will in Mexico. So that's right. That's a great example, right? Oddly enough, we celebrate Cinco de Mayo here, but not down in Mexico. It's not a thing down there. Yeah, I know. So,
But
abstract human creations are viewed as non-material culture. So language, religion, economics, rules, systems, so on and so forth.
how do you even celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
Okay, so what are some material cultures that you associate with America? And what are some non-material cultures that you associate, what are some material cultures you associate with other countries?
Wait.
What are some material things that's like, when you see that product, you think, oh, that's something Americans buy? What's something that, say, somebody in Mexico would buy? A material culture. Can you think of one? It doesn't have to be Mexico.
Caitlin has a blanket. It's like a homemade blanket, and it's from Mexico.
But most countries have blankets.
But it was like some special type of thing. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll tell you what. Our house didn't have a rice cooker until Rachel entered the home. Right. Then it was like step one was get a rice cooker. There's lots of big and little things like that. A shoe rack. We didn't have a shoe rack until Rachel was like, hey, I don't want all the shoes on my floor.
But there's shoes on the floor now.
Because it is part of Asian culture to take your shoes off when you enter the house. Stuff like that, right? Pan dulce? I'm not familiar with pan dulce. Is that a food? I'll have to try that. For me, for Rachel, it's having sports stuff in the home, right? That's something she wouldn't normally have. What a team on it.
Oof.
Now,
the whole wall over there.
Here are four major components of a culture. There's technology, symbols, languages, and values. So let's look at those.
Before Rachel came, there wasn't a wall of Indonesia right there.
Right. Now, when I see tamales, I think of Mexicans. Okay, there you go. I associate the Statue of Liberty with America. Beautiful, right? That's a great example of a material aspect of our culture. Now, society's culture consists of not only physical objects, but the rules of how to use them. And this combination is often referred to as technology. Okay, a good example is, here in America, we all know red means stop. Now, I don't know of any countries that it doesn't mean stop, but, for example, which side of the road you drive on is different, right? So can you think of any ways we use technology here that is different than other countries?
Here our wheel is on the right side of the car. I think the left side.
Well, I'll tell you a good one is.
I'm trying to think of the car.
And I'm not sure why this developed, but in Indonesia, you have to back into your parking spot. You can't pull in forward. Did you notice that when we went to Indonesia, everybody backed into their parking spot? I don't know why that's a thing there, but it was like, I'm not saying I never see it here, but it's rare that you see somebody back into a parking spot. So that is unique to Indonesian culture. I'm curious if anybody had any other ones that they can think of.
On this side of the car.
Symbols. This is at the very. That's a great one. The imperial system, right?
I know that you were going to use that.
We think of technology as far as like our money, but think about too the metric system. We're the only country that still uses feet and inches and all that gibberish. Some countries you can't have social media, or the social media is filtered. The internet's filtered. Here in America we use forks. The first time Rachel, her dad saw me eating fork with rice with a fork, her dad was like, he does know he has a spoon. And to me it's like, you don't eat rice with a spoon. But that's just how you do it in Indonesia, right? So a symbol is something that has a shared meaning based on the culture that shares it, right? So we're talking about the lanterns in East Asia, Statue of Liberty. It can be bad, like the Nazi flag. It could be, the way people paint their face during the Day of the Dead. So these are all symbols of cultures, right?
I wish you had told me that you were going to use the...
Yeah, I know. I made this one. What are some examples of symbols you identify with? And these are just some that I identify with. So I consider myself an Auburn Tiger. I'm a member of my teachers' labor union. I support Medicare for all. I'm a Broadmoor Buccaneer. I'm a Saints fan. I'm a Louisiana citizen. I'm an American citizen. And I am a teacher for EBR. Can you think of any symbols that make up you, Elizabeth?
Oof. Wait, why? Why Saints? Bad.
What are some symbols that make up you?
Auburn,
Yeah.
U.S.
What about the Jubin Park Wildcats?
Oh, yeah,
Isn't it Wildcats? It's Wildcats, right?
No, it's Jaguars.
Jaguars. Jubin Park Jaguars. Any other ones that you can think of that make up you? I mean, you were a Louisiana citizen now. Are there any other fandoms or anything you associate with?
I was in Alabama city first, so.
Yeah. Is there like a Gotcha Life
No.
Nation or something like that?
No.
Fandom?
No.
Right. Okay. Now, language. Now, although this is an obvious aspect of culture, it's not always shared by everyone in a culture the same way. Some have different meaning of the uses of language than different societies have different meanings of the using of language. So, for example, I bet y'all can tell me all kinds of acronyms when you go to text that my parents have no idea what that means.
I say
it's like they're
LOL
speaking.
so much.
Yeah, Gotcha Life, Naruto, NASA. You love NASA.
Oh,
Yeah.
I forgot
Yeah.
about NASA.
Yeah.
Naruto.
Oh, Quinn considers herself part of the, what's it?
BTS Army.
BTS Army? Yeah, that's a good one. Some have means of language that are different, right? So your grandparents are even going to use different words than you use, right? So although we all speak English, we don't all speak English the same way, right? Even my students, right? Like the first time I ever heard somebody say, "Oh man, he's driving on that dude." When I hear driving on somebody, I think that means you ran them over with a car, right? I don't think of that means you're ripping into somebody.
What?
The first time I heard somebody say they're going to flash out, to me that means you're going to start glowing, like literally producing bioluminescence. It doesn't mean you're going to start yelling at somebody.
Literally, what is a weeb? Very confusing.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm a weeb. I'm not sure what a weeb is. Yeah, you have to tell me what that one is. I'm not familiar with that one. Now, can you think of any words that are unique to your local culture? I think of flashing out, driving on somebody. That is unique to Broadmoor.
Oi. Ow.
Oh, I remember when I taught outside of Atlanta. I taught at this little school named Troup County. And instead of driving on somebody, they'd say you're janking on somebody. But it was like all the kids said, "Oh man, he's janking on that dude." And it was like, I had to sit there and go, what's janking mean? But it just means making fun of him. But can y'all think of any jocking? Oh, I'm not familiar with jocking. I can kind of guess what that means. Newbie?
I don't know what.
Yeah. So that's a newbie is a good one. So like my parents wouldn't know what a newbie was, and it's just somebody that's new to a video game. Oh, a hardcore anime fan.
Okay.
A Potterhead. You know, like my parents might think that means something to do with drugs. They wouldn't think that means you're just a fan of Harry Potter. So yeah, that's an example of how we use. Buccaneers. There we go. Ask me anything on Reddit.
I know I've never heard someone in Louisiana say the word reckon, but I've heard it so many times in Alabama it's not even funny anymore.
Oh, reckon, yeah.
Like the word, I reckon you'll do this. And I'm like, I reckon you'll stop using the word reckon.
Yeah.
Makes me angry. And I've heard it so much, I say it sometimes at school.
In Mexico, the part where I am from, certain words are used very differently than people that are from Mexico City. Okay, that's very good. A Sherlockian. Okay, so I wanted y'all to hear this one. This is kind of interesting.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Watch the world premiere trailer.
And I want to watch the world trailer of Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
I want to watch this.
First stop, the place where it all began. The birthplace of every human being alive. Africa.
Okay.
The Kalahari Desert, Namibia. I'm here to find an extraordinary ancient tribe of people, the San Bushmen. Our research shows that their distant relatives left Africa and set in motion the family tree of mankind. From them stemmed every color, creed, and nationality alive today.
Is this true?
50,000 years on, I hear their numbers are dwindling fast. Soon they could be gone entirely. I'm arriving not a moment too soon. Hello? Who? I'm Spencer.
Children, they have boys. This is my wife.
They said. The first thing I noticed was their incredible language. They speak with clicks and other sounds totally alien to me. And the word for zero? Kora. They try to teach it to me. And for two? Ta. And three? Honey. And four? I can't get that for. Is this strange language a window on the past?
Yeah, so that's kind of fascinating. And you think about it, it's like, why did we develop to stop using clicks? I mean, everybody, like, who can't make that sound? And apparently, when language first began, humans used them in their language. Why did we develop to stop using them?
I don't know.
Why documentaries? Oh, she's good. Poor parts of Africa. Well, you got to realize they were looking specifically for the original bearers of the first language. So that's one of the oldest cultures on Earth, and you kind of have to get the most primitive part to get. I mean, you can go to parts that still use clicks, but they were trying to get the close to the original language on Earth. But yeah, you're right. Usually when they do documentaries, they're going to go to the poorest parts of Africa. Let's see. Norali says, I speak Gujarati. I think I'm saying it right. But different parts may speak some words differently. Absolutely. Mr. Velasco, thank you for joining us. I speak Tagalog, but we got like 30 different dialects. Yeah. Now, one of the key uses of language is to convey values. Values are shared beliefs about what is good or bad, right or wrong, desirable or undesirable. Values can be in direct conflict of one another, even in the same society, right? So think about it in this standpoint. Right now, there's a lot of people, myself included, that believe that women should get an equal amount of pay for an equal amount of work,
Yes.
right? That they will defend a woman getting equal pay for equal work. Some people don't agree with that. Okay, there are people in this country that think that it's perfectly fine to pay men more just because they're a man.
Oof.
There's some people like myself that believe that all religions should be respected, and there's some people that will literally say these Muslims need to get out of here and go back where they came from, even if they were born here in America. Can you think of any other value conflicts in the U.S. right now? Where right now in America, you got two sides arguing over what is good and what is bad. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Racist?
Yeah, I tell you, there's a huge amount of racism. Right, there's some people right now in America that think interracial marriage is unethical. That's one example. And I'll tell you this, one of the worst examples I can ever think of is, and I hope y'all never have to experience this, but where I grew up from in Alabama, there's a lot of people, it's like once a white girl dated a black guy, it was like she was contraband. You know, no guy would date her other than black guys because white guys saw her as bad, right? Like there was something wrong with her. You know, it was horrible, it was unethical, but that was a huge thing. Like I remember arguing with people. Like, you can't date her, she dates black guys. I'm like, no, she dated that black guy. There's nothing wrong with her. She just maybe liked that guy. You know, but, you know, what if... Anyways, that's a whole nother thing. Abortion, that's a good one. Immigration. You speak Creole French, but it's a lot different than normal French. Absolutely. Yeah, racism against Asians, that's growing. One of the ones I think about right now that's in direct conflict is about 20% of the country thinks we just need to open up everything and let the old people die. Yeah, Rachel got it too. The stay-at-home order. Yeah, that's a huge controversy right now. So norms are all groups that create norms or enforce their cultural values. Norms are shared rules of conduct that tell people how to act in specific situations.
Wait, that's the British?
Huh?
The British?
Yeah, the British drive on the other side of the road. It is important to note that norms are expected behavior, not behavior itself, and they're divided into two categories, which we're going to talk about. So, for example, in an Asian household, you leave your shoes, you take your shoes off when you enter. In almost every society, you don't play on your phone in the middle of the movie. That's so, I won't lie, it bothers me when I see somebody playing on their phone in the movie.
That's so rude.
Yeah, so rude. Can you think of any norms that are unique to your household? What is a norm? I think about one that...
I've never heard anyone in this entire house say the word roll followed by another word that I'm not going to say. I don't even want to say it.
Yeah, I think about it in terms of Rachel saying full mouth is a
quiet
mouth. Yeah. She's not a fan of Joe talking when he's not eating his food. So what are some that are unique to your home? I'm curious. So a culture norm is a described behavior. So this is the first type, right? And that is a folkway. A folkway is a prescribed behavior. It is not of huge moral significance. It can sometimes offend people, but nobody thinks it should be a law, right? So if you meet somebody, I don't know about now after COVID-19, but you're supposed to shake their hand. If you don't shake their hand, it's not an illegal crime, but it's assumed that you're supposed to. But in Asia, you bow to somebody. If I don't bow to somebody, they're not going to arrest me. Same thing with like eating utensils, right? Like I told you, in East Asia, if you eat rice with a fork, they're like, what are you doing? But I was never going to get arrested.
Psychomaniac.
Right? There's some people that, for example, eat with a fork and a knife. Some people eat with a chopstick. It's not a crime to do one or the other. It's not a spoken rule, but they always make me clean up after my brother. Okay, there you go. And Demary says the same.
But,
Staying up late.
But you, where's that part of U.S. culture? Okay, so like, I was gonna say like, the shaking hands thing. When we went to Indonesia, and I saw everybody like bowing instead of shaking hands. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm like, hashtag no germs for life.
Yeah.
Until I came back here, and I'm like, I'm never gonna shake anyone's hand ever again.
Quinn has a good one.
Hashtag
In a
no
meal,
germs.
she has to let the elderly eat first, then the younger. Yeah, that was something. Rachel, like in Indonesian culture, the women serve the men. And, it's weird for her, because in the household, like, we just serve ourselves, right? Yeah, my cousin's family, yeah, same. Now, the next one is mores, and mores are very different than folkways. These carry a huge amount of moral significance. Breaking one of these can endanger society and its well-being. They're often formalized by laws and carry severe punishments. So a more would be murder, right? Every country on earth, murder is a crime, right? Robbing a bank, dealing drugs, right? And these are things that you're not just going to offend somebody. If you murder them, you're going to jail for it, right? Can you think of any mores you do not agree with, right? So these would be laws that you don't agree with the law. Can you think of any?
I don't think so.
Can't think of any?
I can't think of anything.
Oh, the girls are homeschooled, the boys go to public school. Man, I would not want to be homeschooled, but that's me. Trying to think of any laws that I do not agree with.
I can't think of any.
I don't like our tax code. That's one. I don't like the fact that there are certain laws in place that allow people to make money, like speaking engagements where they don't get taxed. Yeah, red light cameras, not a fan of those. Now, the most simple level of culture is a culture trait. Oh, yeah. This is an individual tool, act, or belief that is related to a particular situation. For example, here in America, we use hammers and nails to build things. That's just something that we do, right? When you see somebody, you say hi. You stand in line. I'll give you a good example, and it's in the picture. For us, holding up the middle finger is a no-no. Most of the rest of the planet, you hold up the middle finger, it doesn't mean anything, right? But let me tell you, if you go to Italy and you do this, right, this, That's like flipping the bird to somebody. Yeah, you don't do that. But here, that means hook 'em horns. That's like the hand gesture for the Texas Longhorns. It doesn't mean anything, right? Yeah, the rich kid picture. Okay, so yeah, that's an example, right? Marijuana laws, drug laws. For me, I think immigration laws are all screwed up. You know, I don't like how hard it is to come here legally, right? Can you think of any culture traits that are unique to Louisiana or maybe to Broadmoor? For me, I think about, here's one, and I forgot to mention this earlier. I'd never heard this until I went to Broadmoor. Somebody will say, bus up, and that means share your snacks with somebody. I'd never heard that until I came to Broadmoor. But in Broadmoor, everybody's eating hot fries and, you know, potato chips. And they eat potato chips all over, but, man, they love those hot fries at Broadmoor. Trying to think of any other cultural... where all the Hispanic kids sit at lunch. That's unique to Broadmoor. And everybody knows where it is. You don't, but they'll all kind of sit in the same little area right in front of B Hall. A lot of the Asian kids will go and sit on that little walkway right as you get up to the guidance counselor's office. I don't know why that became their spot, but it just did. So that's an example of Broadmoor culture that's unique to Broadmoor. Louisiana has the worst drivers on the planet. In fact, there's a move that I call the Baton Rouge, where you're trying to merge onto the interstate and somebody merges in front of you and then tries to run you off the road. I'd never seen that until I came here. Eating crawfish on newspaper. Yeah, I'd never seen that until I came here. I just thought it was a U.S. norm when people speak to random people we don't know in the store and stuff. No, that's kind of a Louisiana thing. Definitely. Now, individual traits combine to form a cultural complex, and this is a cluster of related traits. This is one I kind of think of. I remember this was a huge controversy. New England would go on to win the Super Bowl that year, and the Pittsburgh Steelers would have beaten them and gone to play in the Super Bowl. But what everybody and their brother thought looked like a touchdown was decided to not be a touchdown. And the kind of thing I think about is, I don't know anybody that knows all the rules of football. It's just too big, right? There's too many complexities of it, right? Sometimes the referees don't know all the rules. So can you think of anything that are results of overly complex cultural complexes? I think about our tax code. The fact that most people need a professional to do their taxes. Let's see. You can find different items in stores that have no correlation to anything, like food and clothes stores like Walmart. Absolutely. Yeah, Elizabeth, you're going to need to go to your Zoom meeting.
Today's Tuesday. It's on Mondays.
No, I think it's today. The collection of cultural complexes combine to form larger levels called a cultural pattern. Example, football, basketball, and baseball all come together to form American sports, and football is a major part of society here in the Deep South. What are some other cultural patterns for cultures that you would love to see come here? Insurance is confusing. So, for example, you think about Chinese Lunar New Year, right? All of East Asia celebrates Chinese Lunar New Year. No, it's today. Let me see if I can. Do you have Zoom on your phone?
No, and it's on Mondays.
Unlock your phone and turn the lock off. Unlock your phone. Now, humans have the ability to meet their needs in a vast number of ways. There are some features common, and they're called cultural universals. For example, marriage, right? There's a lot of different marriage customs, but every society has developed some version of a ceremony for marriage, right? Things like that. So that's kind of a cultural universal, right? Most everybody has some form of a funeral. And I always think about this. This is always a favorite of mine. Karaoke Norm should come to America.
Human family. I note the obvious differences in the human family. Some of us are serious, some thrive on comedy, some declare their lives are lived as true profundity, and others claim they really live the real reality. The variety of our skin tones can confuse, bemuse delight. Brown and pink and beige and purple, tan and blue and white. I've sailed upon the 7 seas and stopped in every land. I've seen the wonders of the world, not yet one common man. I know 10,000 women called Jane and Mary Jane. I've not seen any two who really were the same. Mirror twins are different, although their features jibe, and lovers think quite different thoughts while lying side by side. We love and lose in China, we weep on England's moors, and laugh and moan in Guinea, and thrive on Spanish shores. We seek success in Finland, are born and die in Maine. In minor ways we differ, in major we're the same. I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike.
So what are some other cultural universals that you can think of? All right, let's move on. Some things that are universal to all cultures. You don't like arranged marriages? Yeah, that would be not for me. Now, ethnocentrism is the tendency of one's own culture and groups to believe it is superior to another group, right? This is belief that characteristics, and it has some benefits, right? It helps build unity, right? You want to have some level of American pride. Otherwise, our country would fall apart, right? You risk, though, however, becoming extreme, right? So you limit the pool of acceptable members and risk excluding new influences to that culture. And the obvious one is, respecting elders is universal. Birthday celebration. Although I tell you, some religions don't like birthday celebrations. So a good example of this was Hitler, right? So he says, if I'm ever really in power, the destruction of the Jew will be my first and most important job. As soon as I have power, I shall have gallows of gallows erected, for example, in Munich at the Metroplex, as many of them as traffic allows. The Jews will be hung there one after another and will stay hanging there until they stink. They will stay hanging there as long as hygiene is possible. And as soon as they are untied, the next group will follow and will continue until the last Jew in Munich is exterminated. Exactly the same procedure will be followed in other cities until Germany is cleaned of every last Jew. So that is an example of ethnocentrism. Can you think of any other examples of ethnocentrism?
Slavery?
Slavery's a good one. Any other ones? Like Japanese internment.
Any racism?
Any racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia is another one. There's a lot of them, right? Like the belief that it's okay to just treat people like crap because they're part of some other ethnic group. And we all read in Hotel Rwanda, the Hutu versus the Tutsi, right?
Wait, what are some benefits of it?
Well, some benefits could include, like, you need some people to go off and fight for this country, defend it. You need that, right? Otherwise, I'll tell you, if we didn't have some ethnocentrism, nobody would have gone and fought Hitler, and he'd just been allowed to do whatever he wanted to do. You had to have the belief that what the Nazis were doing was wrong and deserved to be stopped. Now, cultural relativism. This is a belief that a culture should be judged by its own standards rather than the standards of another culture. And this helps scientists understand the practice seen as different than their own. So, for example, here in America, we don't think anything of wearing shorts at church, right? That's not like a thing. Pastors will sometimes wear shorts. That is a huge cultural no-no in Indonesia, right? You don't see a pastor or people at a church wearing shorts. So you can't hold somebody, like when somebody shows up to a church here in America and they're wearing shorts, they're not doing it being offensive. They don't even think of it as offensive. Another example would be people underage drinking, right? If I were to see an 18-year-old drinking, my reaction would be, good heavens, look at that 18-year-old. But in like Amsterdam, there's no legal drinking age. A 16-year-old wants to have a beer, they can go order a beer. They don't need their parents' permission. They can just go up to a store and drink a beer.
Wait, can I go do that?
You could do it. There's no legal drinking age. But here's the thing. Most 8-year-olds, 13-year-olds, whatever, they're not going to want to. Like, beer does not taste good. It's almost like an acquired taste, kind of. So, yeah, sports. Yeah, different sports are valued in different cultures. Just having sports. Now, how do you view cultural relativism in relation to different eras? Because that exists also, right? So just for example, it used to be perfectly acceptable to have slavery. Now it's not. It used to be perfectly acceptable to walk out in the middle of the street. Now it's a crime. So, do you feel like, and maybe it depends, but like you shouldn't judge people based on society now. You should judge them based on society then. I kind of go back and forth with that one. Let me see. I kind of go back and forth with that one. Now, a subculture is a section of culture that has a variation from the broad culture. So a subculture sees norms, values, and complexes that are different than the rest of society. For example, we're all American, but Broadmoor has its own culture that's different than other schools. And we talked about the different language that y'all use, so on and so forth. In some communities, sagging is perfectly acceptable. Other communities, it's not at all. Some of the examples I gave, for example, is you think about it. Most adults, their preferred social media is Facebook. Most kids, their preferred social media is Instagram. So that's kind of that back and forth, right? So what are some things that are part of your subculture, like aspects of your subculture? Things that are unique to you that like your generation does that mine doesn't, or that people in Louisiana do that people around the rest of the country don't do. I think about eating crawfish. That's like not a staple of America. I'd never had boudin balls until I came here. I'd never had king cake till I came here. Mardi Gras is not celebrated across the country. But then again, the same thing. I never had pierogies until I met Mr. Mansley. I didn't even know that was a thing.
That is.
Rendang. I never had rendang until I met Rachel. So, what are some parts of your subculture?
Well, I know a lot of kids my age actually watch anime.
Yeah, watching cartoons for kids. Now, in a counterculture, the values of a larger society are challenged. It's possible for a counterculture to develop ethnocentrism, right? This belief that I'm a liberal, so therefore I'm better than a conservative, or vice versa. The morality of counterculture is often viewed differently years later. So at the time, you were considered a radical for being against slavery. Now look back at it, it's like everybody's against slavery. Demarion talked about earlier, when I was a kid, most people did not support gay rights. Now it's considered a huge no-no to be against gay rights. I'll tell you one that I'm guilty of. When I was in high school, I remember I used to say to somebody, like, if they did something bad, I'd say, man, that's gay. And I said it as a criticism, right? Looking back, I was like, that was terrible of me. I should have never said that. Calling somebody gay should not be used as a criticism because you're saying, well, that means it's bad. Like, being gay is bad. Imagine if I put that in the lens of saying, man, that's so black. You'd go, oh my God, that's racist. You can't say that. And you should. You should say it that way, right? That's horrible and racist and you shouldn't say that. Right? But I guarantee if you went back in time, there were white people that said that about each other. I've seen some of my students make fun of each other about being light or dark skinned. it's wrong, right? And it's something that I, as an adult, had to remove from my vocabulary, is to say something is gay in returns of something being bad, right? A good example we see of counterculture right now is these open everything up COVID people, right? Mm-hmm. Can you think of a time in which counterculture was good and a time in which it was bad? Can you think of any time where counterculture was good? I think about the protesting of the war in Vietnam. That's probably a good one. The Civil Rights March was counterculture, and that was good. I can think of some times when it was bad. I think about like the people that on the Bundy Ranch that held up the government, or the Waco, Texas crazy nut job people. Stuff like that. So can y'all think of any times where counterculture was good or times where it was bad? And that will do it for today's episode of Wall Dropping History. I'm going to have to wrap it kind of quickly. My daughter's supposed to be in a Zoom meeting. It's going bonkers. We can't figure out how to get her into it. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Wall Dropping History. Thank you so much for your dedication to education. AP. And let me message you and remind later, Sydney, about anything about AP you may have, or just message me and remind. And so that'll do it for today's episode of Wall Dropping History. And thank you for your dedication.